Ladies and gentlemen, today is the dreaded October 30th, the last day before the sugar jacked up day of Halloween. The good news is the day after Halloween there is no school, which is fortuitous for teachers because we don't have to deal with the tomfoolery associated with sugar rushes. This, this is your practice test made up of a bunch of different questions. The first four are your true-false. The first question says 0.6 squared is less than 1, or more importantly, 6/10 squared is less than 1. There are numerous ways to solve it without a calculator. I think most people have a better time thinking of this question as this. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to solve it a couple different ways real quick. You choose the pathway you like. If this was the question instead of this, because they're the same thing, then I would say 6/10 squared would be 6/10 multiplied by 6/10, which we know from our multiplication of fractions is 36/100. Because that is true, I could then say that 6/10 squared is 0.36, which is 36/100. Same thing. Is 36/100 less than 1? Yes, it is. Because 36 cents is less than $1. Therefore, I'd say this is true. I could also say, since 0.6 squared is 0.6 times 0.6, I could multiply 6 by 6 to get 36. And then we said that if you were squaring a decimal, however many significant decimal places there are, you can double it, in this case 2, and put your decimal place 1, 2 places over, and your answer would still be 0.36. Both ways work without a calculator. I'd like you to be able to do it without a calculator, but if you just simply can't, I will walk around the room and give you any calculation you want. It's fair game. Second question says the square root of 0.8 is equal to 0.4. A lot of you would say probably false right off the bat, because you'd say false. The square root is not the same thing as dividing by 2. You could say something like that, and I'd be like, oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, nice. Not accurate, but still I'd probably say that's good enough. Another way to do it would be to say, if I was to plot this on a line and say the square root of 1 and the square root of 0. Oh no, hold on, that wouldn't work. Sorry, my bad. Square root of 0.81 and the square root of 0.64. This is the tricky one. This is really actually quite tricky, because you have to know that the square root of 0.8, or more importantly, since I want to put 2 decimal places, I'll put a 0 there. The square root of 0.80 would be a non-perfect square that fits between those perfect squares. And you would also have to know that on this number line, this is 0.8, this is 0.9. That's a tricky one. And therefore, if you were to place this on the number line, you would say it's roughly there. Right? Square root of 0.80 would be right there, right next to 0.81. And therefore, again, if I put some insignificant zeros here to help me think this through, the square root of 0.80, or 0.8, is approximately equal to 0.89, which is counterintuitive because it doesn't seem reasonable, but that's the answer, right? If I actually went to a calculator and said, if I grabbed a calculator and said, what is the square root of this? 0.89, which is a really good guess on my part, right? Based on the number line. So that's how you do it. It's tricky. Obviously, that's a better answer because it's simpler. But if you wanted to prove what the square root of 0.80 was, you could work it out that way. Of all the questions on your test, those types of questions asking to estimate the square root of decimal irrational numbers, to estimate the square root, that's definitely the trickiest question. And I'll go through a cheat sheet thing that you can have to help you think that through. Question 3 is the squares. So it says 1 squared plus 2 squared minus 3 squared is greater than 0. 1 squared is 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4. And 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. So when I work out the squares into standard form, I get 1 plus 4 take away 9 is greater than 0. When I work this out, I get 5 take away 9, which is negative 4, not 4. And since negative 4 is not greater than 0, it is less than 0, I say false. And that's why. Negative 4 is not greater than 0. And finally, your last true-false says the square root of 1/25 plus the square root of 9/16 is greater than 1. You should be able to work this out without a calculator, especially because they're fractions. What fraction multiplied by itself is 1/25 is what this question is asking you. Since we know the numerator is a perfect square and the denominator is a perfect square, the square root of 1/25, a rational number, is 1/5. And what fraction times itself is 9/16? The answer is 3 for a numerator, 4 for a denominator. So really, once I work out the square roots of those two fractions, I have this question. And now all I have to do is be able to add those two fractions together, which is a grade, well now it's a grade 8 outcome because fractions are all done in grade 8. Common denominator is required. Equivalent fractions is required. Once I make that, add your numerators, keep your denominator. 19/20ths. That's really what the question is asking. Is 19/20ths greater than 1? No. Close. Close. But not. So the answer is flays, or false. While I press pause there, one of my alphas made a great observation with question 2. He reversed it, and he said, what is 0.4 squared? And he realized that 0.4 squared, if I reversed it, is 0.16. So therefore, the square root of 0.16 is equal to 0.4, not the square root of 0.80. That's actually a really good way of thinking about this question. And I should have probably thought of that, and I didn't. Does that make sense to everybody? He reversed it and thought, well, what is the square root of what, or actually he thought of it this way, the square root of what number is 0.4? That's what you really thought of, didn't you? And I said, well, if I go 0.4 times 0.4, I find out it's this. And since this number and this number are not the same, it's false. Okay. Questions 5, 6, 7, and 8 are your show your work questions. It says what the square root of what number is equal to, approximately equal to, correct? It should be approximately equal to 1.8. Is that what it was? No, is equal to, sorry, is equal to 1.8. And just what Z just did, if I want to figure out, and I'll think of an easier question. If I ask myself the square root of 64 is equal to what? What is the square root of 64? 8, correct? If I think of an easier question first, just to think of it through, okay, this is true. I know this one is an easy question. What can you do to this number to get this number? The answer is square it, correct? If I square the square root, I get the number under the square root sign. So therefore, because this logic, this is an easier question, if I go 1.8 squared, that should tell me the value of x, correct? And since I know 18 times 18, because I memorized my first 20 perfect squares, 18 times 18 is it 324? Yep. Then I write down 324, because 18 times 18 is 324. 1 decimal place, double it, 2 decimal places, put my decimal in, and therefore, the value of x is 3.24. Or if I want to do it again, I could rewrite it, the whole thing. Square root of 3.24 is equal to 1.8. That's really what, that's your answer, isn't it? Right? Second question says the square root of x is between 4.2 and 4.3. So this one's, this one's a little tricky, only that it's a variation of this one, but it gives you infinite possibilities. All right? Can you tell me any number that's between 4.2 and 4.3? What do you think I'm going to choose? I choose 4.25. You might have chose 4.21. You might have chose 4.22. I'm going to choose the square root of x is equal to 4.25. If you have a hard time seeing that, remember what I always did, put an insignificant 0 down, and it makes it easier to see. Then you can think money, right? Between that, I would use 4.25. Same thing we did before. If you take 4.25 and square it, you'll get, and I'll use a calculator for this, 4.25 squared is 18.0625. 18.0625, and therefore the square root of 18.0625 is between those two square roots. Okay. And you have different answers too. Another way to do it is to square 4.2 and square 4.3. I'm sure somebody did it this way. Is it what you did, Sophie? Okay. Do it this way. 4.2 squared. Square is 17.64. 4.3 squared is 18.49. If you did this, what do you think I'll choose for a number if I said the square root? Would you think 18 is a good one? Correct. The square root of 18, or any other number, I could say the square root of 17.65. I could say the square root of 17.641. I could say the square root of 18.48. But the best one would be, if I was looking at this range, the square root of 18 should fall between these two numbers. Different ways you can do it. That's complex. I know it gets complex the more we think about it, because we haven't really practiced it a lot. I've been doing it for 20 years, so my brain understands the intricacies, but I still make a lot of mistakes when I do those. But it makes sense if we keep it simple. Question 7 is the square root of mixed fraction. Remind me, Jojo, can we find the square root of a mixed fraction without a calculator? Can we find the square root of a mixed fraction easily without a calculator? No. What did we say is easier to do? To a what? Improper. So if I think of this question, 81 times 1 is 81 plus 19 is 100. If I think of this question not as a mixed fraction, but as an improper fraction, piece of cake. The red question is infinitely easier, because what fraction multiplies by itself to give you 100 over 81? The answer is 10. The answer is 9. Therefore, the square root of this number here, improper, is this improper root. The square root of this mixed fraction, if I change this here to mixed, the answer would be 1 and 1/9. Agreed? Or 10/9 if you want to keep it improper. And finally, the last one, the square root of 3 and 61, 3 and 61/100ths. If you are going to show this without a calculator, you have to use a fraction. 3 and 61/100ths is 3 and 61/100ths. You have to know how to change a decimal to a fraction. And then once you know that, just what Jojo said, you can't work with mixed. You have to use improper. That'll be 361 over 100. 361 is one of those perfect squares we memorized from 1 to 20. What one was it? 19 times 19, correct? 19 times 19 is 361. 10 times 10 is 100. So therefore, what is the square root of this? It is an improper fraction, it's 19/10. As a mixed fraction, it's 1 and 9/10. And as a decimal, it's 1 and 9/10. How'd you do it? You did a number line, that's fine too. Well, because the number line would be right, it would be one of your posts in the number line, wouldn't it? Because the square root of 3.61, if you're making your number line, what are your two posts? Oh, I gotcha. Yes, okay. Nice. Nice. I can't argue that. 1 and 2. I can't argue that. Okay. I like that. Never thought of that. The only problem with that is this method is to approximate the square root, not calculate the square root. So it worked out being the right one. Don't use that method on your test. If I say calculate, then there is a perfect square and I need the exact number. If I say estimate, use that method. Yeah, you had to know 19 times 19 was 361. Okay. Question 9 says estimate, and it helps you out by saying, look, estimate the square root of 40, use a number line. In these instances, when I give you the number line, you know you have to come up with perfect squares that fit on each end of that number line. The one before it will be the square root of 36. The one after it will be the square root of 49. You'll have 6 and 7. And right off the bat, when you look at it, you know your answer is going to be 6 decimal something. The something part comes with how close it is to each of them. It's only 4 away from the square root of 36, and it is 9 away from the square root of 49. So I'm going to say it's right around, I don't know, there, maybe. Once I have that, my estimation can be 6.2 or 6.3. I'm going to say it's approximately, I'll go 6.3. I'll go 6.3. If you said 6.2, you'll get your mark. Totally fine. Not wrong. If you said 6.4, I'm like, okay, maybe. If you said 6.5, it'll be wrong. Why 6.5? Because it's not right in the middle. If it was right in the middle, I'd say yeah. But it's got to be closer to the square root of 36 than the square root of 49. So 6.3, 6.4, 6.2, all acceptable. 6.1 is a little close, but I might even let it go. Question 10, square root of 38 hundredths. What's the number line? Here you really have to know, and if I give you a cheat sheet, here's what I want you to put down. Square root of 0.36, square root of 0.49. You have to know these two. And once you have those down, not hard at all. Right? Again, since we're looking for between it, and I only have one significant decimal place, put some zeros to help you think it through. It's only 2 away from the square root of 36, right? Only 2 away. And it's 11 away. It's 11 away from the square root of, so it's got to be really close here, right? Roughly. So good guesses. 0.61, 0.62. I'll even go 0.63. It's fine. I'm going to guess 0.61 approximately. If it's close, if you have 0.62, that's fine. No problem. If you have both, or you can put or. Something like that. Something like that. The actual calculation, if we looked at it, is it really? Is it? 6.2. Because that 6 would make that 1 go up 1, right? 0.62 would be the approximator answer, but both are good. And finally, 11 is square root of 2.7. This one's actually kind of, it's not that hard. Because if you do what we said before, since it's an approximation, it's the exact example that we had in the last question, didn't we? That would be your number line. Oh, no, sorry. Boo, Will. Boo, Mr. Mack. 9 and 4. Nope, my bad. Not thinking. Brain not working. 2 and 3. Correct? Nope. Yep. Nope. God, I did it right the first time. See? I've been doing it for how long? I had it right, but my brain's not braining. See? I know. I got to lock in. I was right the first time, but sometimes I screw myself up. So if I'm screwing myself up and I'm pretty bright, I understand when you screw up why you screw up. I get it. Just try not to do it. Try to understand your mistake. So the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 3, if I was to kind of put little imaginary lines where they be, I'd say this would be the square root of 2, this would be the square root of 3, that would be the square root of 4. Would you agree with that? Then it's really easy to put your dot down. It's right around there. How close is that to the middle? Pretty close, isn't it? If I was thinking how close it is, I'd say it's right in the middle. Therefore, the square root of 2.7, you would not be wrong to guess 1.5, approximately 1.5. 1.4, 1.6, sure. Other than that, I have to think. Square root of 2.7, 1.64. 1.7 is fine, yeah. I guess I was. Oh my God, I'm not as good as you guys. Well, whatever. They're all good. They're all good. All right, question number 12. Since a 3.4 meter by 1.8 meter room has a square rug which takes up 1/5 of the area, what is the rug's dimensions, or dim dimensions? So, by now, you've been with me long enough that you know with story problems I want you to draw it. If you draw a square, I will not be happy for the room because it's clearly not a square. So I would like you to use your big boy and big girl brains and make a rectangle. And please label the largest distance, the larger of the two numbers. And that's your rule. That's the first step. Second step, draw a rug. Make sure it's a square. Anyway, that's what we have to start. So the first thing I'm like, okay, I don't know so I know that the square root is 1/5 of the area of the room, but I don't know the area of the room yet. So step one, write your formula for area of a rectangle. Would be great. That's the formula, length times width, or 3.4 times 1.8, or the area of the room. Since you just, Mr. Mack, what's 3.4 times 1.8? Is it? 6.12. So your units is important. Remember, it's not distance, it's area, which is your proper units would be square meters. And then we say, okay, now I know the area of the room. So the area of the room is 6.12 meters squared. Got that for the room. I'll put it in there. And I know that the rug is 1/5. So if I'm thinking, okay, 1/5 of the room. So 1/5 of the room's area. If I think of it like this, then I can translate that sentence very easily to math. 1/5, you can keep it a fraction if you're Sophie, or other people that like fractions. I don't. I like decimals. Of, we know, is multiplication, and the room's area is 6.12. So you can do it with fractions if you want, but that's definitely going to be the easier way. 20% of the 6.2 square meters area. I know it's 12.24. It's 1.24. Is that right? Oh, 1.224. When I work that out, I get this, which I now know is the area of my rug. Meters squared. Step two, but I'm not done. Right? Because now what do I know? I only know the area of the rug. I need to know the side length, the dimensions. So I need to know what is the length and width, dimensions, in order to get it. If you put this on the test, I would be very impressed. What is the length of the rug exactly? The exact length is the square root of 1.224. That is the length. End of story. Done. Next question. However, if you're one of those people that wants to know what that is approximately, you can actually grab a calculator and say 1.224. What is that square root? It's approximately 1.1 meters. It's approximately. So, therefore, the rug is square root of 1.224 meters long, or approximately 1.1 meters. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the exact measurement is whatever the square root of 1.224. Since I'm not allowed to use a calculator, I have no idea, not a clue. But I know that that's approximately 1.1 if I use the calculator. Okay. Okay, a bag of grass seeds is your last question. Will cover 120 square meters of grass. What is the length of a square lawn that will use 5/8 of a bag? So since a full bag will use this much, I need to know first off, how much area will 5/8 of a bag cover? So 5/8 of 120 square meters is what I'm really looking for, right? Since I don't like fractions and fractions don't like me, I can change 5/8 to a decimal. 5 divided by 8 is 0.625. 0.625 times 120. Significantly easier to do it that way. Right? Take your calculator. 0.65 times 120, or 62.5% of 120, is 75. So therefore, if I was to use 5/8 of a bag, I could cover a square lawn of 75 square meters, correct? So 5/8 of a bag will be able to cover this much area. Right? Agreed? But the question says, what's the length of the square? If I know its area, the square root of 75 will be its length, correct? So what's the exact area or length? the exact length of that lawn is whatever the square root of 75 is. If I approximate it without a calculator, I can do that, no problem. 8, 9, 6 away, 11 away, right around there. Now, 8.7. Anyone disagree with me? Take a calculator, ask it, what is the square root of 75? 8.7, 8.66, 8.7. So therefore, the length of the lawn, of a square lawn, is the square root of 75, or approximately 8.7 meters long.